Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to another League of Legends video. And in today's video, this is actually going to be my first ever guide that I've done. So I'm going to need a lot of opinions from you guys on how I do my guides and stuff, so you guys can help me in the future and stuff, because I want to make sure that my guides are up to standard, so like all you guys understand every single thing I put inside my guides. Make sure that I've provided everything inside it. I know that's my job, but I want you guys to make sure I've not missed out anything. Even if I have, I will put it down in the comment section below, replying to your guys' comments. So if I did mess anything out, make sure to go put it in the comment section below, and I will be covering over Shen. So the first thing you guys got to know about Shen is he is a top laner and support, mainly that he's played, by everybody, and most likely he's played on the top lane because the top lane is more suited to him since he's a more tanky person. And there's many builds you can do with Shen, and I'm gonna go over those builds, maybe like 2 or 3 of them. I'm gonna go over the main ones that most people go over for support, top, and probably even mid lane, because mid lane Shen is actually possible, but it's not recommended, but it's still possible because on the mid lane you have to build him AP, blah blah blah, and I will discuss that later on. Now before we go into the abilities, I'm going to quickly explain just a bit about Shen and how he's played, blah blah blah. So mostly Shen is played, like I said, in the top and support lane, and or bot lane for supporting, and most likely because he is a really good support overall, because he can block a lot of auto attacks and stuff, and he's really good for engaging late in team fights. And maybe in the beginning he may not be as strong, but later when it goes into the game, he gets really ridiculously strong, depending on how you build him. So now we're gonna go into the abilities. So we're gonna start off with Shen's passive, which is Key Barrier. After casting a spell, Shen gets a shield affecting other champions, reducing the cooldown of this effect. So every 10 seconds, Shen will get a shield once he's using an ability. Every time he uses an ability, it will cast a shield, which means his Q, W, or E will activate it, and it has a 10-second cooldown. Affecting other champions reduces the cooldown of this effect, means if, for example, something that's combined with the Q ability, so I'm going to quickly get into the Q. Shen's Q ability is called Twilight Assault. The ability cost is actually scaled, like it reduces every time you level it up from 140 to 100, all the way from when it's completely upgraded. Twilight Assault is probably the first thing you're probably going to want to unlock. So Shen recalls his Spirit Blade to attack with it, dealing damage based on the target's max health. The attacks are greatly empowered if it collides with an enemy champion, and collided enemies are slowed while running away from Shen. So what this is trying to say is when your Q, which is your sword is normally laid down on the floor, or it's just it's a standing spirit sword, and normally it's when you start in the game, it's at your base, and you press Q and it brings the sword towards you. And once it brings the sword towards you, you get 3 attacks that you can do with your Spirit Blade, and if it casts through the champion, just like so, looking more at Orianna, her ball is what does damage, and normally she can do damage once the ball passes through the enemy champion. This is much more like Shen, but it doesn't do damage. All it does, it slows them down once it casts through them. But once Shen actually casts it through the enemy champion, he will get 3 charged hits actually. So the first 3 hits, which you get from normally casting Q, is just 3 normal hits, 3 Spirit Blade hits. But once it does pass through the enemy champion, they're actually more empowered, which makes them more stronger and more quicker. And this actually gets really useful when you're playing in the top lane against tanky melee champions, because it does pretty much come in handy. This ability is also based upon the magic damage, so if you guys want to build magic Shen, that's all about going on the mid lane, but we'll explain all that in detail later. So moving over to his W ability, which is Spirit's Refuge, which costs 40 energy at all times, and it has a range of 400. What this does is when it activates for 1.75 seconds, which creates a circle around your spirit sword. What that does is if you or your ally is stunned in that, you will be immune to any auto attacks within 1.75 seconds. So this is actually useful against Draven, Teemo, and a bunch of other people. Normally this is actually beneficial for empowered auto attacks. Let's say for example Vayne's ultimate, when she's pressing R, she actually gets more empowered auto attacks. This also falls along the lines on Draven. Draven's axes do not hurt you once you are inside the circle of the Spirit's Refuge ability. So this ability can come in handy a lot, especially for team fighting, because most of the people in team fights could get auto attacked, but staying within this circle for 1.75 seconds could actually be a life-saving ability. Now Shen's E ability is Shadow Dash. So Shadow Dash is basically what it is. It just dashes through. You can either dash through opponents, or you can use it for escaping or something. Like you can run away with the ability, or you can hop over walls with this ability, but you have to be really really close to a wall, but pretty much he's not made for jumping over walls, but it's actually used a lot for escaping. It can be good for preserving flash. So the passive for this is dealing damage with a Shadow Dash or Twilight Assault recovers 0 energy. So when you start off, of course, it's going to recover 0 energy, but it does increase as you do level up, and then you will recover more energy, and you will actually be able to use your abilities a lot more quicker, depending if you're actually going to go for a CDR build. So the more you level up this ability, the more it's going to be more damaging, and this ability does scale with your attack damage. So now we're going to move over to his final ability, which is his ultimate, Stand United. Now this ability has no cost, which is the best thing about it, and has a global range. Shen shields the target allied champion for incoming damage, and soon after teleports to their location. Shen grants a shield to target allied champions that absorb up to 250, 550 to 850, depending on how much you level it up. It's going from 1 to 3 on the leveling up, plus 135% ability power. Well, it's all dependent. I think it's dependent on how much you build it up, or maybe on your AP. After channeling for 0 seconds, Shen and his Spirit Blade teleport to the allies location. So to summarize, what this does is you can actually use this on anyone, pretty much to save people or to engage in team fights. This is what makes you have to focus on the map. This is why you have to be super map aware about everything, just so you can use your ultimate, because most of the time you're gonna need to use your ultimate if you're gonna save your allies. So this is mainly used if one of your allies is gonna fail in battle, or if you're actually gonna go help an ally with a team fight or anything, because most likely this is used, like when I use it for when I want to go save my mid laner when they're low and they're getting attacked. Normally this is really good against Zed ultis. It doesn't completely block it, but it does. That shield that you do put on your ally, it does protect them from most of the damage. So yes, once you ulti onto them, they do get a shield as well, along with you once you teleport there. And then once you're there, you can start using your abilities, more like Shadow Dash, and then you use your Q, because your sword teleports with you, and then it will be a lot easier to help your teammates. This can also even be used when you're supporting your ADC. This can be used to save them once they're in a bad position or anything, because normally laning on the bot lane, not everything goes well in your favor, so most likely you're gonna need Shen to have his ultimate so you can save your ADC. But even when you're in support, you're supposed to save most likely everyone. This is the one thing if you really want to play Shen. When you want to play Shen, you gotta be very careful. You gotta be super map aware, because if you're not being map aware, then it's pretty much going to be your fault if you're going to let people kill your allies with you having to not do anything about it. Even if you're actually doing successfully on your lane and not helping your teammates with your ultimate, it's actually going to make you do bad in the late game, because you're supposed to actually save your allies as much as you can, reduce the amount of deaths that your team has and the kills to the enemies, and then you will probably succeed late game, because Shen actually gets very, very useful along with his ultimate, as long as you keep track of your allies, because even when playing on the top lane, your whole goal isn't only to tank, it's to also save your allies, and that's the purpose of being Shen. So early on in the game, you're gonna need all 3 of your abilities if you're wanting to attack your opponent. So we're gonna cover over a combo that most people will use on Shen. So firstly, you're gonna need all 3 of your abilities, and you're gonna have to know your opponent. Your opponent's either gonna be ranged or it's gonna be melee. Now once you have all 3 of your abilities, what you need to do is you need to make sure you get close to your opponent. Make sure you're in the middle of the lane, or you can be pretty much anywhere in the lane. It's just to be safe when you're starting off in a battle. The first thing to do, or the first thing I would do, is when I start the game, I always cast my Q somewhere near their turret zone, so they're gonna be half the force to farm, probably get casted through it. And then you can press your Q and probably get your empowered 3 attacks from your sword, and you can easily start off with a bit of damage like that. And that's the first thing I normally do when I'm playing Shen. So once you have all 3 of your abilities, the best thing to do is look for an opening to press your Shadow Dash. So once you find an opening on your opponent and you know that you're gonna get them for a lot of damage, because your E is actually a taunting ability, which means it will drag them towards you, and it will also stop them from using any abilities within the time of the E ability itself. So the combo that I would go for once you have your Shadow Dash ready is going for a E, and then Q, and then W. Basically, what you're going to do is, once you cast your E, you're going to be taunting them, which stops them from doing anything towards you. Then you got to quickly cast your Q, which brings your Spirit Sword towards you, but also cast through the enemy champion, because you're already behind them, which is a pretty good strat of already empowering your sword. While you're attacking them, just about when they're about to auto attack, you got to press your W, so you block, just so you can preserve a lot of health, which will get you slightly ahead every single time. And as long as you keep doing this correctly, as long as you know you're not going to get get ganked, make sure your river's warded, then you can feel free and go ahead and go with this combo. Now we're gonna look over the builds with Shen. Now these are 4 builds for Shen, going over jungle, preventing AD, generic, and anti-AP. There's also a support build, but I will just explain that to you guys instead because I got most of these from the internet, but these are also the builds that I use, and these are the ones that I actually recommend you guys to use yourself. So looking at the jungle build, I would normally probably go for a Stalker's Blade rather than having that blade, but you can also go for the green blade, which the name I forgot, and because that gives you a lot of vision, because it gives you you know, a lot of wards and stuff, and it's pretty useful. Along with the Titanic Hydra, it's actually really useful for farming and stuff, because Shen is a pretty poor farmer, but once it gets to late game, or once it gets to the middle of the game, it gets really, really useful. Titanic Hydra is actually one of the best things to make Shen farm. Going along the lines, you would probably go anti-AD, which is the Dead Man's Plate, and then you would probably go Warmog's Armor, which will give you a lot of that health late game, especially when you're farming between a lot of things. It will also allow you to farm a lot more, because all you gotta do is wait 8 seconds each time, and you can just keep farming and farming. Also, you can use these boots, but I would either go for Swifting boots, or I would probably go for CDR boots, because Shen needs a lot of CDR, but he also needs a lot of speed, so you can vary between 2 of those. Now looking at the anti-AD build, this is pretty much preventing anything that's on the AD lines. Normally, if you're going top against a heavy AD champion, you would probably go for this. So even along looking at the anti-AP, you would probably want to go anti-AP if you're going against a heavily AP damaging person. So this is, for example, probably Fizz. You probably would want to build this if you're going against someone like Fizz, because he's a heavy AP damage guy. And the generic build is pretty much the standard build you would probably go for using Shen, and also it does have some lifesteal within Blade of the Ruined King. Now you guys will probably be thinking, why use Blade of the Ruined King? Blade of the Ruined King will actually help you with your Q ability once casting through your opponent. Like I said before, your Q, once it's casted through your enemy, it will actually give you empowered attacks, and this will be very useful because this will actually make him a lot more faster. Also will give you some lifesteal, which helps a lot in the late game. The more you speed it up, the more damage Shen can do at a time, because being slow with Shen is actually not pretty good. Though he may be slow in the start, there's always Blade of the Ruined King that you could also build, probably second or something, but most likely I would build Sunfire Cape first. If you guys would probably go for a build, normally it will tell you to go for Doran's Shield. Now I would not recommend going for Doran's Shield in the beginning, but you guys can if you guys really want to. But in the beginning, what I always start with is getting that health ruby thingy, whatever, that I forgot. And once you get that, you'll get a lot of health. You actually get some health, so you can verse your opponent, you know, a lot more efficiently, so you'll have more health that they'll have to deal with, and it will be harder to take down. So last but not least, we're going to be covering over the runes and the masteries. Now I'm going to leave the masteries page right over here, which takes 12 ferocity and 18 resolve. Now I don't want to go through them one by one. I just want you guys to just look at them, maybe go apply them, and go see why I put these in. But these are pretty much my recommended ones, the ones that I recommend you guys to do, and these are pretty much the ones that will save you on lane and has a bit of lifesteal and will help you in the laning phase when you're playing mostly in the tanky position. Now we want to look more into the runes. Now going over to the runes, we want 3 quints of attack speed. The only reason is because Shen is really, really slow on the attack speed in the beginning of the game, and he's just awfully slow. So you're gonna want 3 quintessences of attack speed, and make sure they're greater, because we don't want no standard rip-off ones, because they're not gonna work that good for you. So make sure, like I do recommend to be, if you're not level 30, make sure you're at level 30 before buying the runes, because the runes, you know, the other ones are worthless. You guys probably know that. Then we go for 9 seals of greater scaling armor. Then we want to go for the greater glyphs of magic resist. Then we want to go for the greater marks of attack speed. Now mostly in these runes we did pile up a lot of attack speed, and attack speed is definitely what we want on Shen, along with the build of adding Blade of the Ruined King to your build. This can help also, but also we do want these runes intact, because we're probably most likely going to build tanky at the beginning, because mostly when you're playing Shen, you first build Sunfire Cape, which is one of Shen's main core, because Sunfire Cape is really needed on Shen for farming or maybe just hitting the enemies, and then these runes will work perfectly for how you play it. But these are my runes. You can also go around and search up some other runes, but I recommend you these runes as well, because even when you're going against magic damaging people, you also got the greater glyphs of magic resist, but it doesn't help entirely, but it does help you at the littlest possible, and that's going to be very useful. So anyways, this is pretty much everything I can tell you about Shen, all his abilities, all his runes and masteries, builds, and everything. If you guys want to know more about Shen, go ahead in the comment section below and go ahead and ask me, since I do main Shen and I know a lot about him, and I can tell you pretty much everything that you guys want to know. So go ahead and comment, and I will reply to you guys on the things that you guys have questions on. And hopefully you guys enjoyed this for my first guide, actually. Yeah, so like I explained in the beginning of the video, this was pretty much my first guide on SHEN, and I hope it pretty much went well. So you guys can go rate that in the comment section below as well. Thank you all so much for subscribing. Thank you for joining, and thank you for subscribing to my first channel as well, and along with that, coming over to this channel as well. And I hope you guys enjoy my content. Anyways, guys, I will see you guys later. Peace, guys, and see ya.